From Lisbon, this is Frontlines and Backrooms Brief, the key stories shaping our world this week and the commentary that makes sense of them.
Welcome to Frontlines and Backrooms Brief. This week, Gaza and the architecture of Reconstruction. Portugal and the end of the political exceptionalism. And finally, a word about attention in the age of scandal. 3 stories, 1 question: who really shapes the future and who merely reacts to it? And let's start. There is a phrase in international law, ex injuria ius non oritur. From injustice, law does not arise. It means you cannot build a legitimate order on the foundation of a wrong. Someone forgot to tell the Board of Peace. On Wednesday, February 11th, Benjamin Netanyahu sat down in Washington and signed his name to a document. Israel officially joined President Trump's Board of Peace for Gaza. The image is striking. Netanyahu and Marco Rubio holding the signed paper, smiling for cameras. The Prime Minister posted on X with a simple caption: "I signed Israel accession as a member of the Board of Peace." What this image doesn't show is Gaza. It doesn't show the 72,000 Palestinians killed since October 2023, the 80% of buildings destroyed or damaged, the entire population displaced, the hunger, the winter, the bodies under rubble. It doesn't show the irony. The Board of Peace was created to oversee Gaza's reconstruction, and Israel, the country that flattened Gaza, now has a permanent seat at the table managing its future. Multiple UN experts, scholars, and a formal UN inquiry have concluded that Israel's actions in Gaza amount to genocide. The International Court of Justice found the risk plausible. The International Criminal Court has outstanding arrest warrants. And now, the same government accused of these crimes will help decide who gets reconstruction contracts, who governs, who profits, who speaks for Gaza's future. The board's charter makes no mention of Palestinian statehood. There is not a single Palestinian on either of its senior boards. The people who survived the bombs, whose homes are rubble, whose children are dead, have no voice in what comes next. The board includes Turkey's foreign minister, a Qatari official, Tony Blair, Jared Kushner, and now Israel. Rights experts have called this a colonial structure. Colonialism at least pretended to benevolence. Here the destroyer becomes the manager, the accused becomes the judge, and the victims are told to be grateful. So how did Arab states respond? 8 Muslim-majority nations joined the board, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. But they joined with a condition. Their collective statement explicitly said their participation aims at advancing a just and lasting peace grounded in the Palestinian right to self-determination and statehood. Read that carefully. They are using their membership to push for exactly what the board's charter does not guarantee. This is not endorsement. This is infiltration. Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul put it bluntly. Between someone who says I'm the strongest advisor and supporter to Israel, I'm a Zionist, and a president who says I am for peace and for the ending of the killing, if we are logical, we have to try. He acknowledged the contradictions, the funding questions, the absence of Palestinians from executive committees. How the implementation will proceed remains to be seen. But here is the telling detail. Those same Arab states, including every founding Muslim member of the board, issued a joint statement in late January condemning Israel's repeated ceasefire violations. They are simultaneously inside the board and criticizing Israel from within. It is diplomacy of the hostage, present at the table but with no power to set the menu. And what of the Palestinians themselves? The board will hold its first meeting on February 19th in Washington to discuss Gaza's reconstruction. Decisions will be made about billions of dollars, about governance, about what Gaza looks like in 10 years. The people who live there will not be in the room. Israel's far-right ministers who called for population transfers, who described Gazans as human animals, have not changed their positions. They simply signed a document. The Palestinian Authority, already weak and compromised, is excluded entirely. Hamas, whatever you think of it, is designated enemy. There is no Palestinian voice at any level of decision-making, which raises an uncomfortable question. Can peace be built for a people without by the people? The drafters of the Genocide Convention thought not. They wrote Article 2C to prevent the infliction of conditions calculated to destroy a group, including conditions of voicelessness in their own future. The Board of Peace may reconstruct buildings, but it cannot reconstruct legitimacy. And without legitimacy, whatever it builds will rest on the same foundations as the destruction that preceded it. Ex injuria jus non oritur. From injustice, law does not arise. Portugal had presidential elections that in many ways are historical and whose results will shape the future of the country. For years, political analysts spoke of Portugal as Europe's exceptional case, a country seemingly immune to the far-right surge that swept through France, Italy, Germany and Spain. While Marine Le Pen normalized the national rally, while Giorgia Meloni took power in Rome, while the IFD became a permanent fixture in the Bundestag, Portugal stood firm. The far-right remained marginal, contained, irrelevant. That era ended on February 8, 2026, not with victory, but with a warning. And warnings, if you are paying attention, are often more revealing than victories themselves. António José Seguro, the center-left socialist candidate, won Portugal's presidential runoff in a landslide. With 66.8% of the vote, he defeated André Ventura, the leader of the far-right Chega party, who secured 33.2%. It was the first presidential runoff in Portugal in 40 years. A fact that alone tells you something about how fragmented the political landscape has become. Mainstream politicians across the ideological spectrum united behind him to build what they called a firewall against the far right. Former conservative presidents endorsed a socialist candidate. The message was clear. This was not left versus right. This was liberal democracy versus something else. And it worked. Seguro won. The firewall held. But here is what the headlines doesn't tell you. André Ventura's 33.2% is nearly 10 points higher than 23.5% he won in the first round, and significantly higher than 22.8% that party secured in the last year parliamentary elections. In absolute terms, Ventura's vote share grew between the first and second round, even as the entire political establishment mobilized against him. Let me repeat that. The far-right candidate increased his support after the entire system aligned against him. Ventura conceded defeat, but his concession speech sounded like a victory lap. We lead the right in Portugal. We lead the political space of the right in Portugal, and soon we will govern this country. Now, you might dismiss this as standard post-election spin, but look at the numbers behind the bravado. Since 1976, Portugal operated as a resilient, more or less, two-party system. No one was paying attention to Andre Ventura and Chega. Founded only in 2019, Chega was dismissed as a glitch when Ventura first entered parliament. In 2022, that glitch became the third strongest party in parliament. In the last parliamentary elections came the Chega tsunami. 58 seats, the second political force in the country. The shock was felt only by a sleepy establishment that had grew used to the two-party stability, and by analysts who couldn't predict heavy rain even if they were staring at dark clouds. Prime Minister Luis Montenegro's PSD governs without a majority. In 230-seat parliament, the Democratic Alliance holds 91 seats. Chega holds 58. Mathematically, Montenegro needs Chega to govern. Politically, he spent his entire term pretending he doesn't. Publicly, there is cordon sanitario, or cordon sanitaire. But when it comes time to pass budgets and survive confidence votes, Chega's parliamentary votes are quietly accepted. Ventura knows this, and he is betting that Portuguese voters will eventually tire of the hypocrisy. To understand Chega's rise, you have to understand its campaign. It was a masterclass in political communication. Billboards across Portugal read, "This isn't Bangladesh." Another, "Immigrants shouldn't be allowed to live on welfare." These are not political proposals. They are emotional triggers. They tap into anxieties. Housing costs skyrocketing in country, low wages, strained public services, healthcare in shambles. In moments of economic stress, populations look for explanations, and Chega is always ready to supply them. Ventura, a former football commentator and lawyer, understands media instinctively. He's built Chega as a one-man show, a party that exists as an extension of his personality. And here is why Ventura is a political beast. He never needed to win the presidency. He used the campaign to broaden his support base, and delivered exactly that, with surgical precision. Chega's support has grown among young voters, working-class voters, even in traditional left-wing strongholds. The rise feeds on a broader crisis of trust in institutions. Montenegro now faces an impossible balancing act: distance himself from Chega and risk alienating the 33% of voters who backed Ventura, move closer and fracture his coalition while empowering the socialists. The firewall that held in a presidential election may not hold in a parliamentary contest, where power is actually decided. The socialists won the election. António José Seguro will be president, speaking the language of institutional reassurance and cross-party collaboration, but 33.2% of Portuguese voters choose something else. Portugal is no longer exceptional. It now faces the same structural tension reshaping much of Europe: a mainstream that governs and the far right that grows. I was thinking of closing this week's brief with the Epstein files, but I will not. Not because it doesn't deserve attention. It does, but attention from the FBI, from the Department of Justice, from Congress, from Senate, oversight committees, from police. Not yours, not mine. You don't need to search through the millions of pages just released on the DOJ website. You don't need to click. You don't need to scroll. Here is what you already know. The case is worse than we thought. Far worse. It stretches beyond what a normal human mind wants to imagine. And yes, parts of the world we inhabit are shaped by deeply corrupt and morally broken individuals. That is all you need to know. You don't need the names. You don't need the gruesome details. You don't need to spend your evenings reading 3 million documents and absorbing depravity by the page. Because if you do, you will be doing exactly what was expected of you. Read it, get shocked, conclude that there is no hope for the world, decide that the powerful are protected, believe that you can do nothing. And then depression, paralysis, inaction. This is not accountability, it is the illusion of it. The system leaks documents, the public consumes horror, the moment passes and nothing changes. Do not allow yourself that. Instead, demand. Demand action from the authorities who have powers you don't. Demand justice for the victims, living and dead. Demand investigations that lead somewhere, not document dumps that lead nowhere. Understand this. The only real power you have is attention. Where you place it, what you amplify, what you refuse to consume. The Epstein files are designed to be consumed, to shock, to distract, to exhaust. You don't have to play that part. Demand instead. And remember, in democracy, power is not in the files, it is in your hands. Before the interviews, before the debates, this is the context. Next episode of Frontlines and Backrooms podcast, named The Crime Not Meant to be Hidden, with Professors John Quigley, Rebecca Gold and Avni Ataive, starts this Sunday at 8 p.m. GMT, wherever you get your podcasts. And that's the world this week. From the Frontlines and Backrooms, I'm Vladimir Bobetic, and until next time, keep looking beyond the noise.